Hello everyone, we are team number 1. This is our timeline. We are confirmed by David Torres Everest, Juan Antonio Elizondo Espitia, Víctor Alexis Esparza García, David Jesús Sánchez Hernández, Sebastián Miramontes Soto, and Carlos Alberto Rojas Garza.
A system of ideas intended to explain something. Evolution, genetic changes of organisms through generations. Origin, the starting point of something. Chemistry, the study of matter. Biology, the study of life. Nature, phenomena of the physical world collectively. Classification, arrangement of things based on their qualities. Kingdom, a rank in taxonomy.
Universe origin. The question of how was the universe created has always made scientists think of many things. There has been many theories about how the universe was created, including the theory of the pulsating universe in 1922, which according to Alexander Friedman, the universe is cyclic. Our universe is a re-edition of preceded ones and antecessor of many other editions. The Big Bang Theory in 1927, I'm going to explain it on the next slide. The stationary state theory in 1948, in which Fred Hoyle, Hermann Bondi, and Thomas Gold said that the universe doesn't have a beginning, but it will be infinite. But since they said that matter would be created to form new galaxies to fill emptiness, it contradicts the general theory of relativity. And finally, we have the theory of inflationary state in 1981. This theory, proposed by Alan Guth, adheres to the Big Bang theory. It says that matter expanded through the cosmos in an inflationary way after the explosion. The Big Bang theory. This theory was proposed in 1927 by Georges Lemaitre. He said that all matter that today forms the universe had a different configuration and was concentrated in one finitely dense and heated point in space. The large tensions at this point would eventually cause a great explosion, which threw matter all over the cosmos that will form stars and galaxies. All matter that we know was created at that initial moment. Years later, Ralph Alpher and Robert Herman calculated that ancient electromagnetic waves should still be moving throughout the universe with a temperature of 5 degrees Kelvin at most.
Chemical evolution. Alpern invented the heterotroph hypothesis of the origin of life and improved it in his book on 1938. In 1950, Stanley L. Miller met Euler and offered him to be in charge under his tutelage. Euler accepted. In 1953, Miller designed a system of tubes and flasks isolated from the exterior to simulate the atmosphere and hydrosphere of the primitive Earth. He did the experiment with Urey and it yielded surprising results. Many scientists used this experiment with different compounds to see different results, like Joan Oro working with HCN. Thus, many other experiments were made with different compounds to simulate different scenarios. The results obtained by Miller himself continue to be the most accurate representation of abiotic synthesis of organic compounds in the proportion of those found in the meteorites. At any rate, atmosphere was more or less reducing. This doesn't change Alpern's theory.
Well, my topic is biological evolution. The predictions of the heterotrophic theory indicate compounds must have first been polymerized until forming long chains, and the experiments made by Miller and other scientists cover some sources that the amino acids and the proteins in the body called enzymes. Proteins and enzymes are absolutely separate from the materials of biological heritage, and in fact their products is dependent on following the synthesis instructions indicated in the codification of DNA genes. Now, saying years, in the movement of the biological evolution, during the 60s, Alexander Reich, Carl Woese, Leslie Orgel, and Francis Crick were the scientists that proposed the existence of a first biological world based on DNA, RNA, and proteins. And in 1980, small molecules of RNA were discovered in living beings that perform catalytic functions of molecular compounds. In the end, the transmission in which RNA yield the way to DNA as hereditary molecule took place. The stability of the double helix of DNA allowed for a greater fidelity in the replication of the genome. All genes were reconverted to DNA.
The 8th century illustrators, thinkers imagined for the first time that nature could be explained appealing to processes of change and transformation that would give rise to new species. The most notable among them was the botanist Corallus Linnaeus, who was creationist and fixist. However, he accepted that new species of plants, with fully differentiated, distinct characteristics, could appear as time went by. Following sexual crossing of organisms of two different species. Then, when we think about evolution, one of the first evidence that come to mind is fossils. Fossils are remains of the hard and most resistant parts of some living beings from the past, that may remain incomplete on fragmented manner, or only their impression or tracks over a sediment matrix. The discipline in church of studying fossils to discover how life was in the past is called paleontology. Paleontologists reconstruct animals and plants from other epochs starting from fossil remains, and establish how the environments were, as well as the ecologic and kinship relations among ancient species.
Hello, my name is Víctor Alexis Esparza García, and I'm going to talk about the evolution theories of Lamarck and Darwin. Let's start with Lamarck. Lamarck, who was a French scientist, proposed that species change as a result of the habitat, use or disuse of a feature. Lamarck proposed that these modified features could be passed on to successful generations, changing the species over time, as we can see in the image, how the giraffe is growing its neck. But Lamarck's theory was essentially flawed. This because, as we can say, an example, like cutting the tail of a rat does not produce tailless rats, so it has no sense in this point. Darwin theories was based on a combination of Lamarckian ideas and recent fossil discoveries. He noticed that also populations have the capacity to grow uncontrollably, and just natural factors can limit that growth. Also noted that organisms which possess traits better suited to the conditions will have an adaptive advantage and be more likely to reproduce. We can see this in the image below. As we can see, the giraffe with longer neck can reach easily the food, so it can survive easily. However, the smaller giraffe, as it is smaller, it cannot reach the food, so it dies and it don't reproduce.
The purpose of taxonomy is to order and classify biological species into smaller groups based on mainly characteristics about their homologous characters, which means the traits that mainly serve same function but kind of look different. So a brief timeline of classification. First, In 380 BC, Aristoteles classified animals into two main groups: the animals with red blood and the animals without red blood. The ones with red blood were called enymos, and the ones without red blood were called anymos. In the Middle Ages, they classified animals based on what they could do or what functions they could produce. Or, for example, birds like an eagle or like the ones you see on the street, like doves, they just classify them into animals that fly. In 1735, Carl Linnaeus published the Systema Naturae, where he set some rules for the species names, which will later be known as the binomial nomenclature. And he set up the different levels of classification that we are still using up to date, which in order from larger to smaller are kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. And in the 19th century, Lamarck came up with a new type of classification between animals, which is the vertebrates or invertebrates. We talk about taxonomy. We can leave out the 5 kingdoms of life, which are the 5 main kingdoms where we divide the living beings. So the first group is the Monera, which are microscopic creatures that lack a cellular nucleus and organelles. They are unicellular beings that carry out their functions on their cytoplasm, and they can be either auto or heterotrophs, and they reproduce only asexually. These ones right here. Now the Protista. They are nucleated unicellular microbes that might be either autotrophs or heterotrophs, and they can reproduce sexually or asexually. What differentiates Monera from Protista is mainly the nucleus, which the Monera lacks. Now, there's this kingdom where we belong, where we as humans belong, and which is the Animalia. And they, in this kingdom, includes nucleated multicellular beings, and we are heterotrophs and reproduce sexually, and we have ontogenic development. Now the fungi are nucleated and can be either multi-pluri or even unicellular beings, and they are heterotrophs. These ones right here. Now finally, the Plantae, which are nucleated multicellular species. They are autotrophs that have a kind of particularity that they get their nutrients through photosynthesis, which is a process they can make internally, and it involves the sun, water, and carbon dioxide. And they also have sexual and asexual reproduction. They mainly reproduce by small seeds.